Hello everyone, in this video we will look at how we can create a Kubernetes deployment and services and then deploy our Node.js app on Kubernetes, or you can say K8s Cluster. Don't worry if you are unfamiliar with the term K8s, it's just an acronym for Kubernetes. So let's get started. To start off, we will create a simple Node.js application. If you already have a Node.js app, you can use that instead. First, open the terminal and here we are going to create a new directory and I am going to name it as K8s Node.js app, and then navigate into this folder and then we will initialize it as a Node.js project by running the command npm init-y. This is going to generate package.json file into our project directory. Now that we have set up our basic Node.js project, let's work with it. Open the project in VS Code and in here we are going to create an index.js file which is going to be an entry point for our server. In this file we are going to set up an simple Express application. For that we need to install Express. Open the terminal and in here let's run the command npm I and then let's say Express and then let's hit enter. This is going to generate node modules, this folder, and also package-log.json file. And if you go into package.json file, you should have Express as a dependency. And now we will start off by writing the code for our Express application. And in this file, we start off by requiring the Express module and creating an instance of it. Next, we are going to define all the routes that we need using the app.get method. Our first route, which you see over here, is going to be the root route. Here we are making a GET request to the root URL for which the server is going to respond with a JSON string. Hey there, this is working. You can have anything over here. Then we also have one more route. This time we are going to make a GET request to the sign in page and the server is going to respond with a message, hello, please sign in with your account credentials. And after we have defined the two routes that we need, now we need to set up the server to listen on a specific port. So this app.listen method, it is going to listen to connection on the specified host or a port. In our case, it is going to listen on the port defined in the port environment variable if that exists, or a fallback to the port 5000 if the environment variable is not set. And finally, we then export the app object to make it available for other modules. Now that we are done with index.js file, let's declare a port in our .env file. Over here, let's create a file named .env and here we have to define the port equal to 3000, just like this. And for this to work, we will need .env package. For that, we are going to download the .env package, but before that, below this app instance, what you have to do is you have to add this line to load the .env file into process.env object. After that is done, let's save the file and open the terminal again and install the .env package so that our environment variable works with Express application. And this is done. And when you head to package.json file, here you should have .env also with Express. Perfect. And we also need Mocha, Supertest and Nodemon as a dev dependency. So for that, in the terminal, we have to run the command npm install --save -dev Mocha, Supertest and Nodemon. Okay, and then let's hit enter. And after it is done, in the dev dependency section in package.json file, you should have the 3 dev dependencies that we need. And next we have to add a script to start the application. So we will have nodemon index.js so that it can start index.js file with the help of Nodemon. And then let's save this file and close all of this. Now that we have our Express application ready, we have to containerize it using Docker. We are just going to go through a simple Docker file that is going to set up our application in a Docker container. So let's create a Docker file over here with a capital D, and it is going to have no extension. So this is what we are going to have for our Docker file. Do not worry, I'm going to explain it to you what all these commands do. The from instruction that you see over here, this is going to specify the base image for our container. In our case, we are using the latest Node.js image which is available on Docker Hub. This image has Node.js and npm pre-installed. Then we have the workdir instruction which is going to set the working directory inside the container to /user, then source, then app. All the instructions will be executed relative to this directory. Then the copy instruction which you see over here is going to copy your package.json file from our local machine to the working directory in the container. And the run instruction over here, it is going to execute a command in the container. This is going to run npm install to install all the dependencies that are present into the package.json file. And then this copy instruction will then copy all of the files from our local directory to the working directory in the container. The expose instruction over here, it is going to inform Docker that the container is going to listen on specified network port at runtime. Finally, the last cmd or command instruction, it is going to specify the command to run within the container when it starts. And that is what we have for our Docker file. Save the file, okay? We are now going to create a Docker image for our Express application and run it as a container. This will make our application portable, and it is going to ensure that it runs consistently across different environments. So to create a Docker image, you are going to need a Docker Hub account. For that, what you have to do is you have to visit this website, that is hub.docker.com, and here you need to create an account by going on sign in and then complete the sign in process for your account. And you are also going to need Docker installed on your computer. So for that, you have to visit to this website, which is docs.docker.com/engine, then install. And then over here, you are going to have this page which has Docker Desktop for Linux, Mac OS and Windows. As I am on Mac OS, I'm just going to click on this, and here you are going to have this two option: Docker Desktop for Mac with Apple Silicon and with Intel chip. So I have Apple Silicon, so then when you click on this, you will see over here that it starts downloading. But I already have Docker installed on my computer, so I don't need to do this. But if you don't have Docker installed, then do this. So after you are done installing Docker Desktop on your operating system, the next thing we have to do is we have to create a Docker image. For that, let's head back to the VS Code and let's close this, clear this. And here we have to run the command docker build-t, then your username, then / your application name. Do not worry, I'm going to show you what I mean. So this is the command that we need to build the Docker image. What we have over here is docker build-t, then your username that you have selected for your Docker Hub, okay? / followed by the name for your Docker image. In my case, I am giving it as K8s Nodejs app, and then full stop. And then let's hit enter. And you can see over here that it has given us the error which says that it cannot connect to our Docker daemon. So basically what it means is that our Docker desktop application is not running. So for that, open your Docker desktop after it is completely installed on your computer. Then only you can build your image. And here I have Docker desktop open. So as we are over here, you can see that we don't have any image for our Kubernetes application and no container except for Minikube. I will tell you how to bring this also. So do not worry. Let's head back to the VS Code. And then let's grab this command again and paste this, and this time it is going to work. Yep, it does work. And to make sure that your Docker image is perfect, or basically you can say that it has done creating it, we have a command to check it, that is docker images. And there we have this, the image created 29 seconds ago, and this is the Minikube image that I already have. And once we have Docker image ready, let's create a container for it. For that, we have to run the command docker run -d -p 3000 mapping to port 3000, and then we need the username and our application name. So I'm just going to grab it from over here. Yes, copy this and down over here, space, and let's paste this, and then let's hit enter, and our container is created with this ID, and that is it. The Docker container now should be accessible on port 3000. But before that, let's navigate to our Docker desktop and check for images and the container, of course. And this, you can see over here, our application is running on port 3000, and it was 22 seconds ago. We are in the containers, but when you go in images, you should have one image for your application also, and it is in use. Let's go to containers again and let's click on this, and there it takes us to the localhost 3000, and this response, hey there, this is working, the main route for our application. And now that we have made sure that we can Dockerize our application, we are going to delete the container that we created, okay? And for that, you need the command docker rm-f and then the container ID. So basically, we don't have container ID over here. What we can do is we can run the command docker ps to know the container ID, and this is the container ID for our application. So let's grab this and then run the command docker rm-f and followed by your container ID. And if you head back to the Docker in the containers, you won't have your container. It's just one container that I have, but for you it might be empty. Okay, now we want to push our image to Docker Hub. For that, we also have a command. So for that, let's run the command docker login to make sure that we are logged into our Docker Hub, and you can see it is authenticating the credentials, and we should get the message that login succeeded. And if by any chance this is not working for you, basically that is going to mean that you are not signed in with the credential that you provided onto the Docker Hub, or your Docker daemon or basically Docker desktop is not running on your local machine. And now to push the image to the Docker Hub, we have a command that is going to be docker push followed by the username for your Docker Hub and then your application name, and then don't forget to add the latest tag over here. Then let's hit enter. I think it is going to take a couple of minutes, not more than that. So let's visit the Docker Hub. Let's refresh this, and yes, here you have your image ready over here, which was pushed less than a second ago. What happened? Okay, less than a minute ago, whatever. So yes, we do have our image ready onto the Docker Hub. After all this is done, the next step we have to do is to create a Kubernetes cluster. For this, you will need Minikube install, and for that you have to visit this website. I'm just going to leave the link for this into the description, so do not worry, okay? And to install Minikube according to your OS, select that option. I am on Mac OS. I also have Homebrew installed. So for me, this was just the command to install the Minikube. If you are on Windows, this is the architecture that you are going to have. If you have Chocolatey, it is easy with Chocolatey. It is just a single command. So according to your operating system and the architecture, look for the instruction that are given over here and install the Minikube. And once you are done installing the Minikube according to your operating system and architecture, and then to make sure that you have Minikube installed, what you can do is that you can run the command Minikube start, and it should start Minikube. This command is going to download all the necessary files that it needs, set up a virtual machine or a container, and then start the Kubernetes cluster. To use Minikube, you should have kube control installed. So for kube control, which is basically this is called as kube control, you have to visit to this website, and let me just minimize this, and yes, and then you have to install kube control according to your OS. For Mac OS, you should have this installed with Homebrew on Mac OS, and this is just a single line of a command, that is brew install kube control. Done. This is this simple. Kube control will basically allow us to interact with the Minikube Kubernetes cluster. With the help of this, we can create, update, delete, view K8s pods, services and deployments. And once you are done installing the kubectl on your local machine, we have to check that, right? So for that, open the terminal and run the command kubectl version -- client, and there it should give you the client version and the customized version. And now that we have kubectl and minikube installed, when you open the Docker desktop, you should have minikube container just like I have over here. And for images, you should have minikube, this one image. Now we are going to deploy our application in a Kubernetes cluster. For this, we will need deployment file that is going to create pods where our application will run, and service file that will configure a service which will expose the application to an endpoint so that we can access the application from browser. So for that, head back to the VS Code, open this, and over here we are going to create two files that are going to be named as deployment.yaml, just like this, or you can have the extension YML. It's up to you. Okay, and another file that is going to be named as deployment service.yaml. So open the deployment.yaml file and let's start by writing the code for this file. This deployment.yaml file, it is going to be a Kubernetes deployment configuration file for deploying our Node.js application. The API version and the kind specify the API version and the kind of the resource we are creating. API version tells Kubernetes that we are using the apps/version 1 version of the API to create a deployment. The kind deployment specifies that the configuration file defines a deployment, which is a resource for managing a set of replicated pods. Next, we have the metadata section. The name over here is basically the name of our deployment. Label our key value pairs attached to the deployment. In this case, we are labeling it with Node app. The spec section describes the desired state of our deployment. Replica set to 1 basically specifies that we want one replica of our application running. You can just increase the number to scale your application. The selector that you see over here, it is going to define how Kubernetes will identify the pods managed by this deployment. It is going to match the pods with the label app, which is set to Node app. Then we have the template section that is defining the structure of the pods that will be created by this deployment. And the metadata within the template, it is going to include the labels for the pods. Here we are labeling the pods with Node app. And the spec, which is within the template, it is going to describe the container that will run inside each pod. Under the container array, we are going to define the specific container for our application. Name, we are going to set it to Node server. Images specify to the Docker image that we created for our container. This is going to pull the latest version of our image from Docker Hub. Port, here it is going to define the ports that the container will expose. Container port, which is set to 3000, means that our container will listen on port 3000. And this is basically our setup for Kubernetes to manage our Node.js or Express application. Now that we are done with the deployment.yaml file, save this file and head over to deployment service.yaml file. Now let's work on with Kubernetes service configuration file. This file will define a service that is going to expose our Node.js application to the outside world. So same as to what we have in deployment.yaml, we also have API version and kind that is going to specify the API version and the kind of the resource that we are creating. Next, we have metadata section, same as to what we have in deployment.yaml file. This is going to name our service. This is used to reference the service within the Kubernetes cluster. Then the spec section that you see over here, it is the desired state of our service. Selector, it is going to define how the service will find the pod it targets. It is going to match the pods with the label, which is set to app node app. This means that any pod with the label node app will be included in this service. Next, we define the type of a service. So type set to load balancer tells the Kubernetes to create an external load balancer for this service so that our service is accessible from outside the Kubernetes cluster. Then finally, we define the ports for our service. Protocol set to TCP specifies that the service will use the TCP protocol. Port set to 5000 is the port on which the service will be exposed. External traffics will be redirected or directed to this port. Then we have the target port 3000. This is the port on the pods that the service will forward traffic to. In our case, the container in the pod is listening to port 3000, and the node pod, it is an optional feed which is going to specify the port on each node where this service can be accessed. And if we don't have this over here, Kubernetes will assign a random port. Now we have to create the deployment and service in a cluster using the configuration files that we just created. So to do that, we have to create a deployment from deployment.yaml file, and to do that we have a command kubectl apply-f deployment.yaml, and it should create a deployment. And for deployment service.yaml file, we will do the same thing. The only difference is going to be the name for our file. So this is going to be kubectl apply-f deployment service.yaml, and it should create a service. And now we want to confirm if the pods and services are running. For that, to get the list of all the services that are running, we have a command kubectl get service, and you should have this two service, Kubernetes and node app-service. And to check the list of the pods that are running, we have a command kubectl get pods. So let's run the command kubectl get pods, and there you should have your pod, and the status over here is running. And now the status that you see over here for me is running, right? But for you, it can take time to run the pod. So after few seconds, try running the get pods command, and when the status of your pod is running, only then move ahead, okay? And at last, if you want to access the application on browser, we have the command minikube service node app-service, and then when you hit enter, it is going to give you, and it did not just let me complete the sentence, and it just took us to this port over here. And we have our application running, which says that, hey there, this is working. And then we have another route also, right? That is sign in. Okay, so basically the spelling for sign in is wrong over here. So make sure you correct it. But for now, let's grab this and head back over here, and let's test this route also. And there, this is that, yes, it is working. Hello, please sign in with your account credentials. So basically this was just a basic route, okay? Nothing much to do over here. And that is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you did, that please do not forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you have any doubts, please drop them into the comment section. I will be happy to help. You can find the link for the GitHub repository and for this lesson's documentation in the description, and all of the links which I told you are present into the description, okay? And I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye bye and take care.